Symposium. This is the beautiful brainchild of this class by the loving guidance of Dr. Tammy Owens. We are, through this day, we are basically investigating Black feminist thought throughout time. Today, we are re-evaluating the present. We'll be starting off strong with a very personal and beautiful story from Jules Katz.
Okay. Good afternoon. We're about to start off real personal, is what I'm saying. So, a little Black girl plus a white family really does equal an identity crisis waiting to happen. Every family gathering since I can remember has been a source of discomfort and a feeling of great isolation for me. These occasions created both a feeling of hypervisibility because of my dark skin and curly afro that made me impossible to miss in photos, and invisible because despite my parents' efforts to acknowledge and celebrate our differences, there remained a fundamental gap between us, a gap that I now know as racial isolation. So here's my presentation called No, I Don't Look Like My Parents, a Black Identity Formation and Transracial Adoption. As a gender studies major since my freshman fall at Skidmore, now being a senior, I've always been intrigued by how patriarchal and white supremacist systems of oppression have operated within American society. This course, as well as Professor Owens' African American experiences in Black girlhood studies, have given me the proper language and lens to complete an autoethnographic study on my lived experience as a Black woman who is also a transracial adoptee. Now into my approach. So, my research question was, how does Black identity formation develop in Black children who are transracially adopted by white families, and what emotional labor is involved in this process? Drawing on my personal experiences, I analyze how the absence of racial mirroring shapes identity development, focusing on communication patterns, community interactions, and the navigation of dual cultural contexts. I've drawn on Patricia Hill Collins' work in Black Feminist Thought and Audre Lorde's uses of anger to understand how racial dynamics operate within my intimate family settings. I argued that Black youth and transracial adopted families develop their sense of self through a performance of dual identities. However, this development is burdened with the unacknowledged emotional labor of educating white parents about the societal realities while simultaneously forming their own racial identity. Enough of the slides, the story is better seen and told.
Are you reading the book? That should be good to read.
Okay, so what is the looking glass self? This concept provides a powerful framework for understanding how I developed my sense of self within my white adoptive family. According to this theory, individuals form their identities based on how they perceive other people's views of them, a process that occurs through the mirroring of social interaction. But what happens when a little Black girl doesn't have those racial mirrors that reflect her physical reality? Well, my family tried wholeheartedly to reflect back positive images of Black womanhood through books and movies and conversations, but they couldn't reflect back to me what it truly meant to be a Black girl in America because they hadn't lived it. This invisible barrier, which wasn't about lack of love or effort, was about the fundamental difference between intellectual appreciation and embodied/lived knowledge. This led to my performance of dual identities and navigation between my worlds. As a biracial woman, my experience contained another layer of complexity. Not only was I navigating the gap between my family and my identity, but I was also navigating the internal colorism within the Black community. This feeling of dual exclusion became particularly apparent in high school when I joined a mentorship program for high-achieving Black and Latinx students. I found myself caught in a painful in-between space of feeling too white for the Black kids, but too Black for the white kids. My language and cultural references and family structure all marked me as different in Black spaces, while my physical appearance and experiences with racism set me apart from white ones, which led to what I now recognize as code switching, which is a shifting between identities with an ease that masks the effort that it requires. With my Black friends in school, I carefully constructed my behavior and speech patterns in hope to read as more authentically Black, while at home, I existed within my parents' cultural whiteness. This performance made me think of my first retail job at Michael's, where my boss referred to me as my parents' light-skinned handbag, reducing me to an accessory to be shown off. This comment devastated me on so many levels, not just because I was positioned as an object by an authority figure whom I trusted, but as a reminder that my racial identity would always be subject to any and everyone's interpretations. What made this experience even more isolating was that despite knowing that my parents would understand and support me in the situation, I couldn't bring myself to tell them about it. I worried that telling them would upset them or worse, lead to a well-intentioned but very embarrassing intervention at my first workplace. So I carried this distressing incident alone, smiling through all family dinners while processing this racial trauma internally. This pattern of protecting my parents from the full reality of racial experiences became another form of emotional labor I performed without even realizing it was happening. And while my parents were proactive about race in many ways, there remained an unacknowledged form of emotional labor in our relationship, a burden of having to help them understand the nuances of racism that books could not fully capture. This pattern has created a dynamic where I sometimes find myself managing their thoughts and feelings about racism alongside my own, which becomes a double burden that complicates my identity formation. My father, who is Jewish and raised in Manhattan, often tried to connect these experiences by drawing parallels to anti-Semitism. These comparisons come from a genuine place of trying to relate, but often flatten the particularity of my experience as a Black girl into a generic minority experience that misses the crucial differences. This well-intentioned but incomplete understanding of marginalization created moments where I found myself angrily saying, "It's not the same," and then immediately feeling guilty for uttering the phrase since he was expressing vulnerability and helping and trying his hardest to connect with me. But my community really helped with keeping my head on my shoulders. Outside of my family, I sought out mirrors that reflected Blackness back to me with the wisdom that even the most loving and race-conscious white parents could provide. My friendship with Phoebe, my grandmother's young next-door neighbor in New York City, became a lifeline to my early Black cultural knowledge and taught me and my mom all about natural hair care. In middle school, Mia's family provided another crucial site of cultural knowledge and belonging. Every day from the 6th to 10th grade, after school, I spent time in the Goddard household. This became an immersion course in Black culture, from the hip-hop music constantly playing on the record to the food being prepared in the kitchen. These relationships weren't just about the cultural education, but about my sense of belonging. They were moments where my Blackness wasn't something to be explained or justified, but simply lived. This leads into my section on guidance for transracial adoptive families. My adoptive parents created a foundation and great stable attachment through open communication that provided resilience amongst racial challenges. This foundation of emotional security allowed me to explore racial identity questions with the knowledge that doing so wouldn't threaten my place in the family. My parents did many things right. They created an open environment to share feelings, they helped me understand and embrace difference, and they provided unconditional love while simultaneously advocating for Black natural beauty. However, there were missed opportunities. I would have loved more education on my specific cultural background, less intellectual devil's advocate discussions on racism, and the simple reality of their whiteness creating an unavoidable gap in understanding. Drawing on Collins' ethics of care and personal accountability, I believe that transracial adoptive parents must create spaces for real cultural connection without burdening the child, develop racial knowledge as their own responsibility, and build networks beyond the family. In conclusion, my journey of Black identity formation in a transracial adoptive family reveals how Black feminist thought and the looking glass self operates when the mirror is reflecting back once images come from a different racial perspective. The little Black jewels that felt out of place at family gatherings has grown into a Black woman who understands that identity is extremely complex. This research calls for greater attention to the unique experiences of Black adoptees and transracial families, which recognizes that even the most progressive and loving white parents can't fully handle the fundamental experiences of racial difference. What we need in Black feminist thought and Black girlhood studies is to account for Black girls growing up in transracial spaces and adoptions. This will make space for the complexity of identities that form in these interactions, and we need to acknowledge both the power of love across racial lines and the persistent reality of difference that exists regardless of that unconditional love. And then here, lastly, is a slide of my adoption book, which is something I think that my parents definitely did right, and that I will never forget. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this personal and insightful presentation. Next up is someone I've known for a long time and I'm personally very inspired by. Speaking next is Anna Brooks.
Yay, Anna!
Yep.
Fabulous.
Hey, guys.
Hello, beautiful people. Thank you, Leah, for that introduction, and to you all for being here today. My name is Anna Brooks. I am a senior sociology major with minors in intergroup relations and education, and this is my research on weaponizing marginality, how the legacy of Black resistance in American queer culture. I'll be taking you through my process today. So let's start with the initial observation that this came from. Queer people, especially on this campus, are performing our sexualities by signaling them to one another. This got me into the question of what really is queer culture? What is the meaning of its lineage in Black creativity? And what does it mean for white people, the predominance of white queer culture today, for white people to be adopting these Black legacies into our use today? It requires a deeper understanding of how these histories are formed. Understanding how queer history and Black's history are formed inseparably, and diversifying the narrative from one of trauma to one of resistance. Understanding Black and Latino history as inseparable from queer history means understanding how these communities come together and understanding the prolific nature of Black creativity in queer culture today. From things like AAVE or African American vernacular, which is unique to Black people's history in the United States, to stud fashion, which is the performance of Black masculinity in a typically lesbian or woman-loving woman individual. It also brings us to drag, which is so prolific even the wine moms are hip to it. We have drag, and we have RuPaul's Drag Race, which is now one of the most popular shows on TV. To say that queer culture is proving to be commodifiable and profitable is not an understatement. And this is deeply inseparable from the history of ballroom and voguing culture, which is largely the basis to a lot of these histories, especially here on the East Coast. To deepen my understanding as it relates to Black feminist thought, I'm using Bell Hooks' writings on cultural appropriation and on embodied solidarity to offer a theoretical framework pulling from the readings listed here on the left. Bell Hooks offers a deeper understanding of how cultural appropriation operates when someone is using or adopting another group's culture to either benefit themselves socially, culturally, or even materially. This, contrasted with the idea of embodied solidarity, offers us a way to more deeply understand how white queer people can be practicing another group's oppression in the name of their own liberation. To take you a little bit deeper through my process in this research, I'm bringing you through my different methods, which includes the close reading of Bell Hooks, of course, also Patricia Hill Collins writing on politics of visibility and intersectionality, and a close reading of Black trans feminism by Marquise Bay. This is further grounded in autoethnography, based specifically in social justice spaces on Skidmore's campus, and in the queer affinity spaces such as Pride Alliance, for which both of these clubs were at this club freshman year, and this which I am now completing my senior facilitation in, are things that I've been affected by at Skidmore and offer me a local lens for this theory. To offer more of a broad social lens, I'm bringing a media analysis of RuPaul's Drag Race, not just because of its popularity, but also to understand the nuances of intersectional identity as not only performing gender, but as performing racialized gender. Finally, I'll be grounding this theory in a few theories from queer theory and sociological theory. Firstly, capital theory, understanding how people are not only exchanging materially, but also socially and culturally to receive benefits in cultural appropriation. Mainstreamification is also really important here to understand how appropriation on a larger scale also operates to erase history and to change the narrative about what queer liberation looks like. Finally, performativity theory is really what my initial observation was based in, to more deeply understand how we are signaling within groups our group belonging. Finally, what we've all been waiting for, my key findings. First off is this idea of the assumption that queer people, by holding that marginalized identity, can hold the supreme knowledge on marginality more generally. It gets into Collins, the politics of visibility, and I think it's really well summarized by this character over here, Joey J. She is a queen on Drag Race season 13, and she is supposedly RuPaul's first butch queen. As you can imagine, this is complicated because she not only receives the social and cultural capital of performing a racialized form of femininity, but she also, in my opinion, made it farther into the competition than she should have because she was given credit for being the first of something, elevated to be the most visible in this butch queen representation. It also relates directly into what Bell Hooks names as some key qualities of cultural appropriation. Cultural appropriation that is not based in mutual recognition can only be based on denial or fantasy. The idea that Joey J could be the fully embodied butch queen is a misrepresentation of butch history, and it translates into this idea of how white queer people are showing up even in the most local scales. In this idea of denial and fantasy, we're also brought to understand better how white queer people might believe that we can offer a supreme knowledge on marginality, even in spaces that are explicitly race-based dialogues, such as an IGR, and also understanding how in queer affinity spaces, this type of cultural norm of queer culture being a white queer culture also enforces this idea of a universal queer culture that is effectively whitewashed. This next finding relates directly to this idea of having supreme knowledge, and that white people feel that our queerness is negating somehow our ability to hold racist beliefs. This relates directly to this idea of the mainstreamification of the ABE in the Black set, which is more the idea of how these terms are used and the mannerisms which they're communicated from. This is not a list I pulled from the internet, but notes I've been taking from white queer people on this campus for the last several months. There are probably millions of examples I could think of, but one that comes to mind is my first time at Pride Alliance. The loudest period I've ever heard is from a small white trans man, and honestly, I was put on edge, and it was definitely made for me, that space. So I'll put into context a little bit larger the power dynamic these appropriations cause, and how this in and of itself is a form of tokenization, not only of culture, but of individuals who do represent those cultures within the larger queer culture, and also understanding how this is an essential misunderstanding of this history, not informed by intersectionality, but effectively again whitewashing what we would call queer culture today. It brings into question what femininity and masculinity would look like without the binary of white femininity and white masculinity, and it brings it again into the question of performing alternativity being a way of appropriating blackness in order to distance oneself from whiteness. It brings me into this final theory I just presented about weaponizing marginality. It's the assumption that white people can offer a universal understanding of marginalization while having one facet of marginalization and holding a dominant racial status. I think Simone is a great example here, the winner of RuPaul's Drag Race. To me, one of the most impressive drag queens of this century. She is bringing Black innovation, also tying in deep references to advocacy with the Sacred Fair Names dress, and impressive craftsmanship. There was a lot of dissent online for Simone, largely based in this idea that the other queens should have won, both of them white queens, Both of them trained in traditional acting. And people were saying online that they were better overall queens, which not only is this colonizing the way that drag is performed, it's also dismissing the unique way that Simone herself is performing her drag. Second off, we heard that she only won because she was Black. We've heard this enough. But it really simplifies her performance into her racial identity and gets down to this idea that not only is her drag simply about being Black, the things that she is learning from her experience and reflecting in her drag are as meaningless as any other aesthetic decision. It really brings up this idea of how these white and queer people who are kind of dominating the rhetoric around queer culture kind of act as a wolf in sheep's clothes because they have the social capital to interrogate queer culture more largely, but they're not, their underlying racist attitudes are not being exposed. It brings us to a few important conclusions. Firstly, that one's liberation cannot be tied to another group's oppression. To say that queer liberation is going to be also bringing down Black or Latino legacy is inseparable from understanding a genuine queer liberation. Second off, cultural appreciation requires mutual recognition. This means that we cannot be sad assuming that we are not culturally appropriating without fully understanding the impacts of our decisions or the aesthetics and the legacies from which we're pulling from. Oh, okay. Third off, the ability to claim culture in and of itself is an operation of power. I would encourage people in the room in general who are making decisions, ask ourselves, would somebody of the culture from which I'm appropriating be benefiting in the same way that I am from doing this? Would they receive cultural ostracization? Would they receive a job if they did the same thing? Finally, weaponized marginality endangers queer POC. The reality is we are, as white queer people who are denying the need for anti-racism, are perpetuating white supremacy within the queer community and understand how weaponized marginality is in of itself going to be weaponized marginality in of itself is not going, queer representation overall cannot be always a good thing. We need to interrogate how authentic queer representation representing Black and Latino legacy looks like today. Thank you. Thank you all so much. I appreciate you all for listening in. And next up, we will have the Emmanuel Donaldson to present her research.
I just had to check that. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Emmanuel Donaldson, and I am a sophomore music major who took part in our Black Feminist Thought course. If you were here yesterday, you heard from my peers how every step of our class aimed to address the enormous but frankly ignored role that Black women play in the world. My personal research into this fact took root in music, namely music made by Black women. Music is not only my major, but my passion. Over a decade and a half of musicianship, I've drawn this drive from the dark fact that we are not represented in a normative musical sphere. But while I was using a Black feminist thought lens to consider the whitewashed space in which I've done my music work, I found something else. Scraping the pan, digging the best bits off the bottom, dragging grit of emotion into your voice. There is a musical practice, begun and continued by Black women, working on a for us, by us basis. I theorize that Black artists, specifically Black female artists, have created a capital A archive of Black music, and by borrowing practices and traditions from one another, have knitted together their work by association. This capital A archive, or the Black musical canon, as I like to call it, isn't wholly physical. You can find it in the records spun at cookouts. You might hear it in the song your dad chants to you on your birthday. You might unlock it with the church hymn that you sang so many times when you were younger that a single word bobs it right back up to the surface. It's still on CDs, but the archive is passed down from ear to ear. It is, at its heart, tradition. We store this music of ours non-physically by making it memorable and making it important culturally. The most common way that Black women have done this is to genre cuts. The easiest handoff that I observed in my musicology was between secular tradition and sacred tradition. I specifically used gospel and R&B throughout my paper. There you go. My primary sources were Patricia Hill Collins' Social Construction of Black Feminist Thought and several papers and books by Dr. and Reverend Alicia Lola Jones, who is above us right now. From Social Construction of Black Feminist Thought, I pulled out the description of the ethics of care, how emotion and love centered on Black women radiating from one another is what keeps us sane, keeps us whole, and keeps us definitively human. This idea of motherhood and sisterhood towards each other, and this love that envelops all is what renders our artwork alive and also cements us as people. What Dr. Alicia Jones contributed to my work was a series that she described of how the tactical practices of Black gospel affected the world. In her words, Black gospel is so deeply embedded in Black culture that to link yourself back to the church vocally provides you with a wider audience. So when I ended up asking, what purpose does a non-physical archive of Black music serve Black women today? The answer was edification. The answer was also authenticity. The music in the Black canon is desirable. Our music is informed by our diaspora, our experiences, and it is rooted in so many rich histories and such a diverse culture. It is stolen from so often because people are attracted to the beauty of the sound that we make. The most simple way we can ensure that it goes nowhere, even when the wrong person profits off of it, is to weave it into our children, our families, and our identity. Black women, as musicians, have upheld a consistent and cognizant practice of taking elements from other genres for the sake of self-preservation. We are quilting our creative works into the audio archive, and by doing so, we preserve the practices as well as link them back to ourselves. There are too many examples of our art being taken, and the way that we fight against this is to prioritize the music of Black women beyond performative actions. So to conclude, I'm going to leave you with a few things that I observed as similarities in styles between R&B and gospel, so sacred and secular. So we start off with vocal range. Vocal range is primarily a gospel technique first, and it is the practice of, having a wide stretch of your voice and how deep you can go, how high you can go. Sorry, my phone turned off. Two examples that I pulled were one gospel song and one R&B song. Open My Heart by Yolanda Adams. Around 4 minutes in, you hear her sing a G3, which is, and then, my phone will turn, sorry. She goes up to a C5, which is, so she goes from to, and then in Pick Up Your Feelings, which is an R&B song by Jasmine Sullivan, she goes from a D2, which is to an F5, which is so. about singing, y'all. I'm sorry, I gotta collect myself. So, most of these techniques are used in these styles because they draw out emotion from both the singer and from the listener. Vocal range is used to be expressive, it's used to extend the listener's ear and to convince them into feeling the depth of the emotion and following the vocalist where they go. So if the vocalist is taking you to the high heavens, you're going with them. That's the idea. Next up we have nothing. Just kidding. Next up we have trills and melismas. Now, melismas are typically they were found first in classical practice. However, they've been more used in R&B before they were genre crossed over into gospel. These are both forms of ornamentation that one may use on their voice to decorate how they sing. So, I'm gonna try to sing this. This first up here is, a melisma is a stretch of many notes into one word, and doing this allows the listener to follow with their ear how the singer leads down the scale or to whatever point they're going to, and also makes the music more pretty, basically. So this example comes from Potential by Summer Walker at around 25 seconds, and it goes, "You got potential," oh, something like that. Ooh. And so she stretches out that one word over about 12 notes. And then, I don't know if I can pull this off, as nervous as I am, but this second example is from a Tasha Cobbs song called Your Spirit, and it comes in at about 3:57. Okay. It comes in at about 3:57, and the comparison between these two is that these are both emotional moments for the singer. Summer Walker is singing her heart out to a love that might happen, saying her whole album from this point up until here is about, I've been used, but I might trust you. And this is where the melisma comes in. See, I'm pouring out my heart. It's pouring with these notes. And then with Tasha Cobb's example, this is a prayer. This is asking God, fall down on us. God, lend us your power. We want your spirit here. And so she says, Spirit breathe on us. Ooh. And it's this plea. So there's this depth of emotion that is lent to both of these, even though they're about very different things. Not really. At the base, they're still both about love. So I'll go through these last two quickly. Pitch has no gender versus intensity and power. This is something that was covered by Reverend Alicia Jones, if you're curious about it. She talks about how in Black gospel tradition, the men don't have to sing low. The women don't have to sing high. Again, it goes back to vocal range. Everybody can go anywhere. Some of the best gospel singers can sing all the way up in the nosebleeds or sing all the way down to the bottom, like I showed you with Yolanda Adams. And this is also true of R&B singers, especially in the modern age. It applies to a wider audience, the more that you can reach for everybody who's listening to you. And then, very quickly, the last one, vocal flip. A vocal flip is a switch between a chest voice and a nasally voice. And this is an R&B practice, first and foremost, that has come over into gospel practice, especially modern Black gospel, with the intent of making the music more vibey, because it adds a punch to it. You're switching from up here to being greedy up here, and it pulls you in, it pulls the listener in, and it asks them to give something of themselves to the music. So if you're ever curious about an example like these, you can look to Promises by Naomi Rain, around 3:27 for gospel, or Supermodel by SZA, around 0:50 for that kind of thing. So I leave you with that. Just be explorative and input your time for a Black woman artist.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel, and all of our other speakers today. We're going to take a quick break to go eat cake. You have vanilla and chocolate and lemonade and water. Take a bathroom break. Do whatever you need. What?
The meeting will be the break will be 5 minutes because we're doing evaluation.
God, 5-minute break. Go enjoy yourself.
Talk to the people.
Ooh.
Oh.
Erica!
Yes. It's this one.
The break is over. Our next talking about beauty standards through body from self perspective, we have Jocelyn.
Yes! Talk to the people.
Welcome everyone. My name is Jocelyn Gilroy. I am a sophomore here at Skidmore College, double majoring in psychology and American studies. So how many people here have seen America's Next Top Model? You can tell it's a fan favorite. I personally used to watch the show as it was coming out around the age of 12 with my older sister. This is my presentation about the internalized racism about Tyra Banks. My title is We Are Rooting for You, a Black feminist approach on beauty standards, internalized racism, and empowerment in America's Next Top Model. So now I'm going to propose some research questions. What role can internalized racism or beauty standards play in the reproductions of violence against other girls of color due to beauty myths? How might Black feminist theory be applied to dispel the myth of beauty and enable women of color to resist or create their own beauty and self-worth through psychology? Now, I'm going to give some context of the show for people in here who haven't seen the show. So, Tyra Banks is the host and the main producer of America's Next Top Model. The show ran for 24 seasons from 2003 to 2018. The show features aspiring models
who compete in weekly challenges, photo shoots, and rent walks. Contestants are judged by a panel of various fashion professionals, including Tyra Banks. And typically, once a week, a contestant is eliminated. The winner of the season will win a modeling contract, a magazine spread, and a cash reward. Now, the show is facing heavy controversies due to Tyra Banks' actions towards the women of color on the show and some of the insensitive challenges the contestants were forced to complete. The contestant from season 4, Tiffany Richard, in particular, felt the brunt of Tyra's treatment. So now, these are my methods that I use for my research. Of course, I had to watch America's Next Top Model, which was no problem as I was already rewatching it. To truly understand the intentions of Tyra Banks, one must immerse themselves into the show to witness the context that shapes her reactions. I also have some scholarly readings as well to help me. Naomi Wolf goes into depth about the beauty myth and how it affects women of color. I also use other readings such as Sabrina Strings, Fearing the Black Body, and Bell Hooks, Loving Blackness. Lastly, I use the Clark doll experiment. In the Clark doll experiment in the 1940s, we could truly see exactly how observant the youth truly are. Tyra Banks is now facing criticism for promoting harmful beauty standards on America's Next Top Model, particularly those rooted in Eurocentric ideals. Now you may be wondering, what is the beauty myth exactly? Drawing from Naomi Wolf's The Beauty Myth, beauty is shown as a male-driven social construct used to control women by pressuring them to conform to unattainable standards. Sabrina Strings' Fearing the Black Body links these standards to Enlightenment eras of racism that idealizes thinness and whiteness while devaluing Black women's bodies. Despite being a Black model, Tyra Banks internalized these ideals and persecuted them on her show, often targeting Black contestants like Tiffany Richards, more harshly than the white ones. As you can see, right here is Tiffany Richards. It's a direct visual from season 4. Very stunning, very beautiful. Tiffany is a returning contestant from season 3 and started the famous phrase, "That bee poured beer on my knee," after getting into an intense bar fight. The show continuously paints her as a ghetto chick and who is unwilling to work. Throughout season 4, viewers are able to recognize how tired Tiffany has become, trying to assimilate with the other girls on the show, even defending her quote-unquote ghetto accent. She calls her grandma for support. "I've been trying to be somebody I'm not. I'm smiling, but I'm crying on the inside." In the same episode, Tiffany gets eliminated along with another girl, Rebecca. After Tiffany gets eliminated, she does not react and says she seems relieved and even says she's ready to go home. Unlike her peer Rebecca, who is crying her eyes out. After a season of Tyra Banks picking on Tiffany and painting her as ghetto and big, Tyra wants a big reaction from Tiffany and decides to pick on her. This is why Tyra Banks begins to argue with Tiffany to get ghetto on her and get a reaction from television. Tiffany does not give the response Tyra is looking for, instead defends herself. I had a clip. I don't know where the clip has gone. But we're gonna move on from it. In the clip, it showed the intense emotions Tyra had behind her yelling at Tiffany. She screamed at her that we were rooting for you. We were all rooting for you, but you are unwilling to work for it. In the scene, as you can go look for yourself after, you can see how she only targeted Tiffany while Rebecca, the white contestant, standing right there crying her eyes out. She even looks directly at Tiffany and is like, "See how she's crying? Why are you not crying like this?" Tyra Banks' reinforcement of racist stereotypes on national television harms not only the contestants directly, but also countless young girls watching at home, shaping their self-image and believing in harmful beauty standards. America's Next Top Model is rated TV PG, which means that the show also targets young girls from the age of 12 and up. And the Clark doll experiment in the 1940s shows exactly how children are very observant to their surroundings. Disturbingly, the African-American children would prefer the white doll, associating the white doll with positive traits, while they deemed the black doll as bad. Many young girls were watching America's Next Top Model when Tiffany got eliminated, and saw Tiffany as a problem. as Tyra Banks portrayed her to be. Now in Bell Hook's Loving Blackness, through the lens of eco-womanism, loving Blackness means loving the land that both devalues you and scars women of color. Just like Naomi Wolf's The Beauty Myth, embracing Black womanhood as a type of resistance against society that devalues your body and livelihood. Banks creates a show that was built on the reinforcement of the beauty myth, and many young girls watched and believed. It is obvious that Tyra Banks favors Eurocentric beauty because she yelled at Tiffany only and not Rebecca. As you can see in the corner over here, there's Tiffany just over her. All of the stuff that Tyra has done to her throughout the season, as Rebecca is crying. The internalized racism that Tyra Banks has is from starting modeling at the age of 15. She basically grew up in the modeling industry. In the early 2000s, the modeling industry was racist and only promoted Eurocentric beauty. During her show of America's Next Top Model, she would target the Black women contestants instead of the white women. Even earlier in the same season, she made a black woman shave her head because it was not deemed professional enough. Many young girls of color who are watching saw Tyra Banks paint women of color as destructive and not hardworking over and over again. In conclusion, Tyra Banks' America's Next Top Model reinforces harmful stereotypes of false empowerment, deeply affecting how young women of color see themselves. Through the lens of Black feminist thought, we could truly understand how internalized racism and the beauty myth influenced Tyra Banks' actions. On top is a quote from Tiffany. Many years after the show, from 2021, it is beautiful for TV. They love to see a Black girl struggling and somebody coming to save her. Resistance is change, and we must change the way we see beauty in society. Change society's beauty standards for the young girls of color to be seen, valued, and celebrated exactly as they are. Thank you.
Hello, beautiful people.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I'm just out here. Hello, beautiful people. Today we heard from so many amazing scholars, but we still have one more who will be finishing out our presentation today, which is the Abby Sabbaths.
Let me just go ahead and test the clicker, make sure I know what I'm doing. And I don't. click, there we go. Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Abby Savitz, and I am a religion and gender studies double major and a sophomore here at Skidmore College. And I'm going to go ahead and just start us off with my research question. How do Black women in the South reclaim traditionally oppressive religious structures as a means of both liberation and resistance? And before we get into answering this question, I wanted to talk about why this actually is so important to me personally. As a religious studies major, I do a lot of research about, especially with the intersection of gender studies, I do a lot of research about stuff that genuinely just kind of sucks. Like, there's a lot of very depressing stuff, and when looking at what I wanted to research for this class, I was like, I want to do something that is happy. I want to do something that, like, reclaims all of these. Religion has been so historically used to oppress Black women specifically, so I wanted to find ways in which religion can be used to not do that, to do the opposite. And as further context, I grew up in Houston, Texas, and despite being raised Jewish, I have been extremely aware of Southern Christian religious culture in my entire life. I've also noticed a trend in the way many people raised in the Northeast United States talk about the South. Whenever I mention I'm from Texas, I often get remarks such as, wow, you don't look like you're from Texas, and I'm so sorry about that, even to the point where a man told me, drunk, crying, Abby, I'm so sorry that Greg Abbott is your governor. And I did not know what to say to that. And despite what the Texas government might want you to believe, the South is not the stereotype that many Northerners believe it to be. It is in fact a place just as worthy of respect and appreciation as any other in this world. I bring to you today my research on one of the many ways Black women in the South assert their existence and find deeply meaningful and accepting religious community despite the oppressive systems working against them. Let's get into it. I can't talk to you about womanist theology without first telling you a little bit about womanism and Alice Walker. Alice Walker is a writer, poet, and activist best known for one of her many novels, The Color Purple. If you are interested in more of Alice Walker's work outside of the very, very brief snippet of, what did I just do?
Oh, it's bad.
I fixed it. Outside of the very brief snippet of womanism that I can give to you guys today, I highly recommend her website, Alice Walker's Garden, where she is still writing and still commentating on current events. Womanist, as coined by Alice Walker, comes from the term womanish, i.e. the opposite of girlish. To quote Walker, womanish is the term typically used by Black mothers to female children as a way to tell the child that she is acting in a way that is outrageous, audacious, courageous, or willful. To act womanish is to act grown up. Another quote on the definition of womanist by Alice Walker is, a woman who loves other women, sexually and or non-sexually, appreciates and prefers women culture, women's emotional flexibility, values tears as a natural counterbalance of laughter, and women's strengths. Sometimes loves individual men, sexually and or non-sexually, committed to the survival and wholeness of an entire people, male and female. And then, how does that impact theology? So we know what womanism is. How does that factor into theology? One of my key sources for learning about womanist theology was a book by Monica A. Coleman called Making a Way Out of No Way. Coleman's thesis in this book is to define womanist theology as a theology based in the experiences of Black women, wherever they may be. Here's a really good quote. Womanist theologies add the goals of survival, quality of life, and wholeness to Black theology's goals of liberation and justice. Womanist theologians analyze the oppressive aspects of society that prevent Black women from having the quality of life and wholeness that God desires for them and for all of creation. So essentially, womanist theology is a theology entirely based in the experience of Black women, whatever they may be. So of all the places that could really use some womanist theology, Texas may need it more than most given the state of our government. When looking for an example of womanist theology being used in Texas, I came upon a group called The Gathering. Located in Dallas, a group which directly identifies as a womanist church, my research has centered around a case study, using The Gathering as a direct example of how Black women in the state of Texas have reclaimed religious structure using womanist theology as defined by Coleman. Through careful examination of The Gathering's digital presence, I was able to answer this question. The Gathering offers a definition of how they use womanism. The term is derived from womanish, a Black folk expression of mothers to female children, suggesting being grown and responsible. Therefore, the womanist preachers seek to responsibly approach the homiletic text, learning more than what's on the surface, doing deep exegetical work of looking at the biblical text through a lens of liberation. As more preachers, pastors, and ministers of the word intentionally do the deeper exegetical work of interrogating the sacred biblical text, to raise up the muted voices of women, the theological landscape for womanism continues to expand. Throughout my research, I found a variety of different ways that The Gathering does work to reclaim Christian religious structure. One of those is their Building New Tables initiative, which partners with the Chicago Theological Seminary in an effort to queer womanist teaching, therefore creating religious officials who are equipped with a Black feminist lens in their preaching. Additionally, The Gathering engages in a lot of activism, working closely with the Pride for Black Women and Girls organization. Their sermons all interpret the biblical text in ways that empower Black women rather than minimize them. To conclude, The Gathering's practices represent one of the many ways in which Black women use religion in the South to create authentic experiences of religion that uplift and empower them. I would like to end with a call to action. To learn from groups like The Gathering, to learn that even in a harrowing and terrifying political climate, structures like religion are your own to reclaim. If religion is a culturally important thing to you, you don't have to get rid of it to feel empowered. Religion, and therefore life itself, can be whatever you want it to be, and the best thing you can do is take structures that have been used to harm and turn them around on their head and use them to love instead. Today's theme is the present, and I want everyone to remember that we don't have to wait for some grand hero to come and magically fix anything, and that the steps to creating a world that we want to live in is to create that within the world that you are living in now.
Beautifully done. Very interesting. Okay, y'all. We're gonna close it out together. Day 2. Everybody give an applause.
Thank you so much to Jules, Anna, Emmanuel, Jocelyn, and Abby. Also, thank you to all of our guests who came to watch the symposium. And a final thank you to Dr. Owens for guiding your class through this whole process. That was Claiming the Present. Come back on Tuesday next week for our day about protecting the future. Thank you again, and I think we're going to go into the first evaluation.
Yes, we are.
Thank you for joining. Take care.
Yeah.